Okay, picture this. For more than 100 years, two of Europe's biggest kingdoms are locked in this brutal, sprawling conflict that completely changes the map. And what's wild is that it all starts as a family squabble over a crown, but it ends up creating something brand new, the modern nations of England and France.
So how on earth does a power struggle between cousins blow up into this bitter, generation-spanning war? A war that would forge national identities and set the stage for centuries of rivalry to come? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go right back to the beginning.
To really get a handle on a war that lasted 116 years, you have to start with what kicked it all off, a death in the French royal family and an empty throne. And this wasn't just some political headache. It was a full-blown succession crisis that was about to set Europe on fire.
So right away, you've got this huge problem of who's the rightful heir. On one side, you have England's king, Edward III. And his claim looks pretty solid. He's the direct grandson of the old French king through his mom, Isabella. But the French nobility, they're not having it. They say, hold on a minute, and they dig up this ancient rule, Salic law, basically arguing the crown can't be passed down through a woman. And just like that, they pick one of their own guys, Philip VI. You can see this isn't just a legal argument, it's the perfect excuse for a war that, let's be honest, both sides were kinda itching for.
But, it's never just about the crown, is it? The other huge issue was land. For ages, English kings were also French dukes, controlling massive chunks of France like the region of Aquitaine. Now, this meant the King of England was technically a vassal to the King of France. Think about that for a second. The king of one country owing loyalty to the king of another. It was a complete feudal nightmare and a constant source of tension just waiting to explode.
Sooner or later, all this tension had to spill onto the battlefield. And when it did, in the early days of the war, the smaller, poorer nation of England just dominated. And they didn't do it with more knights or bigger armies. Nope. They did it with a piece of technology that completely changed the rules of war.
So while France was putting all its faith in the flower of chivalry, these heavily armored knights on horseback, the super soldiers of their day, England did something different. They armed their common men, their farmers, with this, the longbow. I know it looks simple, just a piece of wood, but back in the 14th century, this thing was as disruptive as a stealth bomber would be hundreds of years later.
And here's why it was such a total game changer. A skilled longbowman could shoot 10, maybe even 12 arrows a minute. That's 3 or 4 times faster than a crossbow. These arrows could fly an incredible distance, and up close, they could punch right through a knight's expensive armor. This completely flipped the script. It wasn't about noble combat anymore. It was about regular guys being able to take down the elite warrior class from afar.
And the result, well, it was absolutely devastating. Just look at this number, 10-1. At the legendary Battle of Agincourt, the French nobility literally charged into a muddy field and were just systematically wiped out by a storm of English arrows. That one battle was a national disaster for France. It was the moment that proved the age of the armored knight was brutally and decisively over.
So fast forward to the 1420s, and honestly, things are looking grim for France. I mean, really grim. The English control Paris, the French king is on the run, the whole cause just seems completely lost. It really looked like the war was over. And then, from the most unlikely place you could possibly imagine, the entire story is about to get turned on its head.
Her name was Joan, a teenage peasant girl who shows up and claims that God himself sent her to save France. And in an age of cynical, power-grabbing nobles, her pure, absolute conviction was like a force of nature. This quote says it all. She had this total certainty that this was her destiny, and that belief was about to inspire a completely broken nation.
And get this, the speed at which she turns things around is it's mind-blowing. In May 1429, she leads the French army and pulls off an impossible victory, breaking the English siege of Orleans. Just 2 months later, she's standing right beside the Dauphin, the French heir, as he's officially crowned king, which brings all this legitimacy back to their side. Now, tragically, she was captured and executed only 2 years later, but it didn't even matter. The fire that she lit just could not be put out.
But here's the thing. Her real victory, the one that truly lasted, wasn't about taking a city. It was what she did to the hearts and minds of the French people. She took this messy, feudal conflict that was all about which lord you served and turned it into a sacred national war for the very soul of France. She gave them something to believe in, a country to fight for.
And that change in mindset, well, that's what ultimately decided how this whole thing ended.
The end of the Hundred Years' War didn't just settle who got to wear the French crown. It decided what England and France would become for the next 600 years.
This, right here, is probably the biggest takeaway from the entire war. The very idea of loyalty changed. Before the war, a soldier fought for his local lord, his duke, his king. After the war, he fought for France. He fought for England. This is the birth of national identity as we kind of know it today.
So, when the dust finally settled, what was the scorecard? Well, the French kicked the English out for good and united their country under a really powerful king. England, now that it had lost all its land in Europe, had to pivot. It turned its focus to the sea, becoming the island nation we know today. The old way of fighting was dead. And most importantly, out of all that fire and blood, two completely distinct national identities were forged, defining what it meant to be English and what it meant to be French.
That leaves us with one last question, doesn't it? The fighting stopped in 1453, sure, but the rivalry that was born in this war, it has echoed down through